Up until just last week, I was engaged to my fiancée, Tina, and we were in the middle of planning a wedding that was supposed to happen in just a few months. But everything flipped upside down, and I ended up calling off our engagement after her family basically cornered me, pressured me, and tried to bully me into something I couldn't accept. To give a little background, Tina and I grew up in very different worlds. I'm an only child, raised by two parents who work in research, and I grew up in a home that was steady, loving, and supportive. My parents gave me the chance to focus on school and personal growth, and they worked hard to make sure I had a comfortable life. They taught me about values, independence, and respecting boundaries. Tina, on the other hand, had a childhood I honestly can't even imagine. She's the oldest of 6 kids in a family that has always struggled financially. Her parents battled addiction issues, which left their home unstable and constantly strapped for money. As Tina and her siblings got older, her parents started shifting the weight of their financial problems onto the kids, basically expecting them to help keep the household afloat. From the beginning of our relationship, Tina was upfront about her situation. She explained that every month she sends money back to her parents just so they can make ends meet. And on top of that, she often helps her siblings out too, because they call her constantly whenever they need something, which, as I quickly learned, was pretty much all the time. Anytime she tried to say no or push back, they would guilt-trip her into caving. They'd remind her that she was the oldest, that she had a responsibility to take care of them, and that family is family, so she had no choice but to help. That was a totally new concept for me. My parents never once asked me to pay for anything on their behalf. In my world, financial independence and personal boundaries were just the norm. So naturally, I encouraged Tina to think about setting boundaries or even pulling away a little, because to me, it was obvious her family was taking advantage of her. I genuinely believed it wasn't healthy for her to be constantly drained, both emotionally and financially. But Tina never really saw it that way. She would tell me flat out that her family's business wasn't mine to interfere with. If I brought it up too often, she'd push back hard, even throwing it in my face that I didn't understand what family obligations were really like since I was an only child. She'd hint that my perspective was cold, selfish, or lacking empathy. And after hearing that enough times, I decided it wasn't worth the constant argument. At the end of the day, it was her money, and she had the right to spend it however she chose. So I stepped back, even though I could clearly see how much it was wearing her down. For the 2.5 years we dated, I made a conscious effort to be the kind of partner who supported her in every way. Financially, I always took care of her, not because she demanded it, but because I wanted to. Whether it was her hair and nail appointments, our dinners out, or even vacations, I never hesitated to cover the costs. I thought that was part of showing love, part of being a gentleman, and I wanted her to feel cared for. So earlier this month, after 2.5 years together, I finally proposed. She said yes, and I felt like I was on top of the world. I was so sure this was the start of one of the happiest chapters of our lives. The very next day, her parents invited us over for lunch. I assumed it was to celebrate the engagement, maybe to welcome me into the family properly. Out of respect, I didn't think twice about saying yes. But the second we sat down, I realized this wasn't a celebration, it was an ambush. Right away, her family started talking about how thrilled they were that I was going to be marrying Tina, but then they added a condition. They said that in order to really be part of their family, I had to prove my worth. At first, I thought maybe I misunderstood. I asked what exactly they meant by proving my worth. Wasn't loving Tina and committing to a future with her enough? That's when her father pulled out what he called a to-do list. I'll never forget looking at it. It included paying off their mortgage, covering an education loan, renovating their kitchen, buying them a new car, and a bunch of other financial demands. At first, I honestly thought it had to be a joke, some twisted way of hazing me. But when I looked around the table, everyone was serious. I turned to Tina, hoping she would reassure me or step in, but instead, she just stared at her lap, completely silent. That silence cut deeper than anything her family could have said. I read over the list again, and it was insane. These weren't small gestures like helping out with groceries or pitching in for a bill. They were huge, life-altering expenses that no reasonable person would ever ask of a future son-in-law. Trying to process what was happening, I asked Tina what was going on, but she wouldn't answer. Her father spoke up for her, explaining that Tina had always been the family's main source of financial support as the oldest child. Now that she was getting married, he said it was only logical that I would step in and take on at least half of that responsibility. He even added that since I was financially comfortable, it shouldn't be that hard for me anyway. The way he said it, like it was nothing more serious than asking me to pass the salt, made my blood boil. I scoffed, told him point blank he must have lost his mind, and said there was absolutely no chance I would be paying for any of their debts. I reminded them I was marrying Tina, not them, and I wasn't about to take on the role of financial provider for people I barely knew. I turned to Tina one last time, desperate for her to back me up, but she just sat there in silence while her family kept pressing. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. When the conversation turned to our future and my money, Tina finally spoke, and what came out of her mouth made the situation even worse. She told me that her family's demands weren't unreasonable at all. According to her, as her man, it was my responsibility to step in and shoulder some of those burdens, and she framed it as if that's what marriage is really about, sharing responsibilities. Her words hit me like a sucker punch. I was stunned, because she had never once brought this up during our entire relationship. Before I could even respond, one of her sisters jumped in, backing Tina up. She pointed out how unfair it was that Tina and I were living comfortably while her other siblings struggled just to cover bills and lived in near poverty. Then her brother joined in, looking smug and full of confidence. He said since Tina had been sending them money every month without hesitation, it was now my turn as her future husband to pick up the slack. He even threw in the line that a real man wouldn't have any problem doing exactly that. At that point, I honestly felt like I was losing it. I turned to her brother and pointed out the irony. He was a man himself, so why wasn't he stepping up for his own family instead of expecting me to do it? That comment clearly offended him. Then I turned back to Tina and asked her straight up if this had been her plan all along. Did she really intend for me to become her family's new provider once we got married? Because if she had been upfront with me about this earlier, I would have told her immediately that my answer was an absolute no. Frustrated, I pressed her harder. Why had she never once mentioned this to me in over 2 years of dating? The whole thing felt sneaky and manipulative, like she and her family had been keeping this plan under wraps until it was too late. I told her to her face that it sounded exactly like something a gold digger would do, stringing someone along for love and commitment while secretly waiting to cash in. The second I said gold digger, the room exploded. Her parents started yelling, accusing me of crossing the line and disrespecting Tina. Her father insisted that asking for money from a future son-in-law was perfectly normal and nothing to make a fuss about. Her mother chimed in too, saying this was simply a family obligation and that if I wanted to marry Tina, I needed to step up and be part of the family. Tina, clearly embarrassed but still defensive, didn't back down either. She claimed that what she was asking of me was something any woman would expect from her partner. Then she doubled down, saying I was being selfish, dragging up the same argument she'd used before, that because I was an only child, I couldn't possibly understand what it meant to come from a big family. She even tried to reassure me by promising that if I just took care of everything on their little to-do list, her family wouldn't ask me for anything else in the future. But when I looked around the table, all I saw were greedy faces staring back at me. They weren't naive or desperate, they knew exactly what they were doing. They were circling me like jackals, and I suddenly realized what a fool I had been not to see it earlier. For years, I had trusted Tina, brushed aside red flags, and convinced myself it wouldn't affect me. Now it was clear as day, her family's entitlement ran deep, and Tina fully supported it. That moment sealed it for me. As much as I cared for her, I couldn't marry someone who saw my financial stability as a resource to be drained. Shaking my head, I told her point-blank that if she wanted to call me selfish just because I wasn't willing to bankroll her entire family, then fine, I was selfish. I was selfish enough not to let myself be used as their personal ATM for the rest of my life. Her support of their demands only confirmed my worst fear, that this had been her mindset all along, and she had been hiding it from me until she thought I was locked in. I asked her directly if she really thought I was that naive, that she could marry me, manipulate me, and force me into carrying her family's financial burdens. Her face turned red, and she stammered out denials, but they fell flat. She argued that because I had savings and a stable background while she and her family had nothing, it wasn't unreasonable to expect me to help. To her, the fact that I had more meant I should simply hand it over without hesitation. I closed my eyes for a second and took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I've always thought of myself as a sharp, level-headed person, but in that moment I realized just how badly I had been played. This wasn't about love or partnership anymore, it was about what I could provide and how much they could take. When I opened my eyes, I looked straight at Tina and told her I wasn't going to argue anymore. Clearly she expected me to step in as her family's provider, but I wasn't that man, and I never would be. Since that's what she wanted in a partner, it was best we ended things right then. I told her the engagement was over. Her face went pale, then horrified. I told her flat out she should find another guy willing to be her family's golden goose, because I wasn't it. Then I asked for the ring back, the large diamond ring she had insisted on, which I had bought to make her happy. But if there wasn't going to be a wedding, there was no reason she should keep it. That demand set off another round of chaos. Her sisters started yelling, accusing me of betraying her and breaking my promise to marry her. Tina, now crying, pleaded with me to think it over. She swore I was acting rashly, that I was being too harsh, and if I just calmed down I would see her family's requests weren't that unreasonable. Her father, though, got aggressive. He shouted that I had no right to break his daughter's heart after she had given me two of the most important years of her life. He painted me as the villain, completely ignoring how outrageous their demands had been. Then, with anger boiling over, he actually threatened me, saying if I didn't keep my word and marry her, he and his sons would beat me up. Despite all the shouting, crying, and threats, I didn't budge. I told them I didn't care what they tried to intimidate me with, nothing on earth would make me marry Tina after what I had just learned. My mind was made up, and no amount of guilt-tripping or pressure would change that. I even warned them that if they laid a finger on me, I'd have the police on their doorstep and would drag them into court with every dollar I had. That shut her father up quickly. Tina kept crying, clinging to me, and refused to give the ring back. At that point, I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. Completely drained, mentally, emotionally, and even physically, I walked out without another word. I couldn't stand to be in that house, or around that family, for another second. Since the breakup, things have gotten messy. Tina and I share a lot of mutual friends, and everyone seems to have picked a side. Most people are on my side, they agree her behavior was manipulative and calculated, and some have even started openly calling her a gold digger. They believe she deliberately kept her family's expectations hidden until she thought I was too committed to walk away, and that I had every right to end things when I did. But not everyone sees it that way. A handful, mostly a few of the women, think I should have at least considered helping her family in some small way. They argue that when you're in a relationship, especially with someone from a less privileged background, you naturally take on some responsibility for their family too. In their eyes, I was too quick to shut the door, and they feel I should have tried to compromise instead of walking away completely. That left me wondering for a while if I had done the wrong thing by breaking it off. Update 1. I've recently found out that Tina has been running around trashing my name. She's telling people I'm not man enough because I refused to take on her family's financial burdens, and that I left her like a coward. She's even going as far as to claim that any woman who marries me in the future is doomed to be miserable, because I'm selfish and only think about myself. Those accusations are not just wrong, they're insulting. For 2.5 years, I treated her with respect, love, and generosity. I gave her everything I could, and the only time I pulled back was when her family's demands crossed a line no one should have to tolerate. For people asking how I could have been with her that long without realizing who she really was, believe me, I didn't know. If I had seen even a hint that she expected me to bankroll her entire family, I would have ended things on the spot. The truth is, Tina was the one who pursued me from the very beginning. She asked me out, she set up our first date, and she always seemed head over heels for me. She presented herself as independent but weighed down by family responsibilities. That's why I believed in her, stayed loyal, and gave her everything she wanted without hesitation. For 2.5 years, she gave me no reason to doubt her. But in one afternoon, everything flipped. The moment her family laid out their outrageous demands and she chose to side with them, I saw a version of Tina I didn't know existed. Suddenly, I was face to face with her entitlement, her lack of boundaries, and her willingness to justify behavior that should never be acceptable. That's when it hit me how different our values and priorities really were. To those who think I should have stayed and tried harder, all I can say is this: I know my worth. I know what I bring into a relationship. I'm not selfish, I'm a loving, generous partner. But there's a huge difference between being supportive and being exploited. Marriage is about building a life together, not about one side draining the other dry. Tina and her family crossed that line, and the only thing left for me to do was walk away. Some people have told me I'm lucky, and they're right. Better to discover the truth now than after marriage. I can't even imagine how much worse it would have been if I had tied the knot first and only then realized what they really wanted from me. Looking back, I think her family thought they could get away with it because of the way I had treated Tina in the past. I've always been quiet and non-confrontational, the type to avoid arguments. Whenever we went out to eat with her family, I picked up the bill. For her birthday, I spared no expense to make sure it was special. Even when Tina went out with her siblings to watch a movie or grab dinner, I was usually the one booking tickets, covering cab rides, or paying for their fun. At the time, I thought I was being kind and supportive. But now I see how that must have looked to them, like I was an endless ATM. In their minds, once I put a ring on her finger, that meant I was fully locked in and would naturally step up to cover all their debts. They didn't expect me to push back. They didn't think I'd ever stand up for myself. And that's why, when I finally did, they lashed out with yelling, threats, and guilt trips. As painful as this whole ordeal has been, it's also been a much-needed wake-up call. I'll never let anyone, partner or family, take advantage of me like that again. Thankfully, Tina and I never lived together. She was still in an apartment with roommates, and the plan was for us to move in together after the engagement. Obviously, all those plans are gone now. I gathered up the clothes and personal items she'd left around my place and decided I'll just mail them back. I have no interest in seeing her ever again. Update 2. A lot of people keep telling me to fight for the engagement ring, to demand it back since I paid for it. Legally, they're right, it's mine. But honestly, I hadn't bothered. I figured letting her keep it was worth the peace of not having to deal with her drama anymore. To me, it felt like a small price to pay to walk away clean. But tonight, things escalated. Out of nowhere, Tina showed up at my apartment drunk and angry. She started pounding on my door, screaming for me to open up and talk to her. Of course, I wasn't about to do that. There was no way I was opening that door. After everything that had happened, the last thing I was going to do was let Tina back into my life, even for a conversation. I spoke to her through the Ring camera instead, asking why she was even there, pounding on my door in the middle of the night and disturbing all my neighbors. She yelled that she missed me, that she wanted us back together, and that I had no right to walk away when she had already decided I was the one she was going to marry. According to her, I had insulted both her and her family over something as trivial as money, and I should have just gone along with their requests. Then she tried to romanticize it, saying money would always come and go, but the love we had was supposed to be what truly mattered. To me, it sounded like pure manipulation. Every word was carefully twisted to make me feel guilty, to make me question myself as if my boundaries were the problem, not her family's outrageous demands. Listening to her, I realized just how far she had fallen in my eyes. The woman I once loved, trusted, and admired was gone. What I felt for her now wasn't affection, it was pity and disgust. I told her calmly but firmly that I had been clear from the start, we were finished. For years, I had supported her and even helped her family out of kindness, but expecting me to bankroll them for the rest of my life was something I never agreed to. I reminded her that while I had been patient and understanding, this was a line I simply could not ignore. She fired back that this was just how marriages worked, and that I clearly didn't understand how relationships were supposed to go. That's when I lost my patience. I told her I was done with her excuses and generalizations. No healthy marriage is built on one partner carrying the full financial weight of someone else's family. It was ridiculous for her to act like that was normal. I admitted that, for the longest time, I had genuinely felt sorry for her. I thought her endless sacrifices for her family explained why she leaned on me financially, and I never once questioned it. But now I understood that she was no different than they were using me for money. I told her I believed she had waited for me to propose just so she could lock me in and pass her role on to me. Her face shifted immediately, a mix of offense and the realization that deep down, she knew I was right. She tried to argue more, but I cut her off. I told her she needed to leave my property right then, or I'd call the police. She switched tactics and begged me to at least unblock her number, but I refused. I told her flat out I didn't want contact with her ever again. When she realized I wasn't budging, she lost it. She kicked at my door, cursed me out, and then stormed off into the night. It's been 4 months since that night, and honestly, it's been a tough road. I ended up moving out of my old apartment and staying with my parents while I looked for a new place. It wasn't easy, but the constant harassment from Tina and her family made it impossible to live there any longer. I've also had to let go of a few friendships. Some people kept telling me to reconsider, to give Tina another chance, and it became clear they didn't understand what her family had tried to do to me. Cutting them off hurt, but protecting my peace mattered more. Tina, meanwhile, wouldn't stop. She kept finding new ways to reach me, different phone numbers, emails, even social media accounts. Eventually, I had to change my number and email just to escape the nonstop stress. After talking it over with my dad, we've decided to take the next step and file for a restraining order. I don't ever want to open the door to find her standing there drunk, screaming at me, or worse, dragging her family into it. At first, I wanted to believe she was just struggling with the breakup, but it's clear now that this behavior won't stop on its own. It's sad that things came to this, but I've accepted it. The only way forward is to protect myself and never let her or her family have that kind of power over me again.